Hello everybody, I'm Gwen Campbell-Mindes. Welcome to Gwen's Bookish Ramblings. So we're flipping over to Mercedes Lackey's Reserved for the Cat this week because the next book in the Didius Falco series is still on hold. So, Reserved for the Cat, as part of the Elemental Masters series, that is to remind those who may not remember or who have just discovered this channel and also don't know what book I'm talking about. The Elemental Masters series roughly, at least starts out being mostly about magic workers who their powers run along, in effect, elemental lines. That is, they can draw power directly from their respective elements, the standard four, earth, air, fire, water, but also they have a particular connection and ability to control, command, speak to, interact with elemental creatures of given elements. So, for example, salamanders in fire, sylphs in air, undines in water, and brownies, fawns, whatever, in earth. And you have to have a particular sensitivity in order to even see them, and so you have the series is based around that, roughly. And the first two books in the series, which I have already talked about on this channel, which were Gates of Sleep and Serpent's Shadow, those are very specifically about mages. In this book, which is in fact not the next book in the series, but it happened to come to hand, this book takes a step towards broadening the world of the Elemental Masters to include people who have other skill sets, who are quote-unquote sensitives. This series in future parts actually broadens rather severely as Mercedes Lackey starts going into people who are sensitives rather than mages, and it's a split that is at least somewhat reminiscent of her Valdemar series. That is, you have the mages, and those are the people who have, you know, magical superpowers that can do dramatic things, and then you have the sensitives, and those tend to be people with psychic abilities like Valdemar and mind magic. So you have the people who are empaths, the people who, you know, have clairvoyancy, who have those sorts of skills that are much less dramatic than being able to create a tornado of fire, but are nonetheless magical. In the case of this book, our central protagonist is Ninette, and Ninette is a ballerina. She is a ballerina who has just made soloist at the Paris Opera Ballet company. Now, those who don't know the history of ballet, you need to understand something very, very important about ballet dancers. Ballet is something that has it has a 600, 700 year history, because ballet, of course, did evolve from the dances of the nobility and sort of worked, and what you had the dances of the nobility, and those who were really, really good at it, you know, did more complex dances, but as time went on, the dances became so difficult that eventually the only people who could do them were people who had specially trained for the purpose, which was when they started not just having any old noble who was eminently talented at dancing. They would pull in any random old person, boy or girl, poor or not, who was talented at dancing. The difficulty is that dancing is a very short career. As with any extremely athletic area of endeavor, your career is over when you stop being able to keep up with the younger dancers, which is usually somewhere around your mid-30s into your 40s. At that point, your career ends and you have to find a new one. Now, that's not such a huge problem in this modern day and age. This was a very, very big problem about 100 years ago, which is when these books are set. You see, Among other things, you have to keep in mind that women were not legally persons at that time. Women could not legally really have any jobs except, skivvy, maid, nursemaid, nanny. Yes, they could become a ballerina, but once you stopped being a ballerina, you didn't have any marketable skills to get another job. And so it was a lot of hard work. The pay was terrible. You certainly didn't have anything remotely resembling insurance coverage. And the other thing was that dancers, for centuries, women who were on the stage were thought of as being no better than they ought to be. If you were a dancer, if you were an actress, if you were anything, unless you managed to reach the point of being some kind of, icon like Sarah Bernhardt, you pretty much were assumed to be a whore. And most ballet dancers, the smart ones at least, parlayed this and turned themselves to to being a courtesan, to being a prostitute, to using their physical charms to charm gentlemen into giving them expensive gifts. If you were a smart cookie, what you did was you danced in the ballet and you found somebody who would patronize you and would give you lots and lots of expensive jewelry. And when you hit 35 and couldn't dance any longer, you would, if you were smart, have collected a tidy sum of jewelry and a tidy nest egg of those sorts of gifts that you could sell off. Whether bit by bit so that you could live independently, or to spend the money so that you could manage to purchase some kind of a property to run a boarding house or something similar. There are only so many positions for women to teach ballet. There are only so many positions for, girls to help with the sewing in the costumes. There are only so many positions open for character dancers. And so you're basically out on your ear if you can't get lucky enough to find something like that. And don't forget, of course, also that men are the choreographers, men are the teachers, men are the ones who have the important roles. Women are there to stand still, look pretty, and point their toes a lot. The point is that you become a dancer and you have a lot of independence in a way. You have a job, but it's not a respectable job. Not that being a ballet dancer is fundamentally immoral, but that people assumed that anyone who became a ballet dancer was so, because they were scantily clad on stage, therefore they must spend all of their lives scantily clad for the men around them. A male ballet dancer was in slightly less dire straits because he was a man, but male ballet dancers also didn't have it necessarily all that easy. So Ninette, at the start of this book, is determined. She doesn't dance because she loves to dance, although she did as a young child. She dances because her mother had said, you could be a ballerina, and what that means is you could find yourself a male patron, and you could then soak him for every red cent he's willing to give you, and at the end of it, when you're 35, you will have enough money to live independently. Because no respectable man is going to marry you. The fact is that her mother had married an Englishman, and that Englishman had up and vanished, and the problem is that if you don't have a husband, even if you have your proof in a sheet of paper that says, yes, this is my legal marriage license, you're going to be treated as no better than you ought to be anyways, because you are a single woman. And so Ninette is effectively, even though she is not legally or properly a bastard child, socially she might as well be. Socially she is a bastard child, on top of being a girl, on top of being poor. And so her mother has basically said, I don't have any choice. I'm going to push her into doing this because ballet will give her something that she can live off of in the meantime, and she can find herself a gentleman who will pay her for her services in effect, and she will be able to save up money and live independently, and that is Nina's ambition at the start of this book. And it's something that Mercedes Lackey repeatedly drives home, especially when she has an ignorant Englishman who is sniping about how Nina had lied to find her way into her position, and he doesn't like being lied to, and Nina says, and if I hadn't lied, you wouldn't have given me this job at your company, and I would have had to go onto the streets and sell my body. Do you like that option better? It's something that gets very, very heavily emphasized because this is a problematic issue in terms of history, in terms of the difficulties that women faced when they could not follow a quote-unquote traditional path. In this case, what happens is a cat shows up, and Nina had luckily managed to score a lead role when the lead dancer busted an ankle, and she dances it, and then the lead dancer basically pitches a fit in the aftermath, and Ninette gets fired. Sorry, I keep calling her Nina for reasons. She gets fired, and she has to make her way, and a cat shows up and says, "Follow me, do what I tell you, and I will help you out. I will get you someplace where you can survive and be safe and well and prosper." And he does. He steals train tickets and a ferry ticket, and he gets her over the channel and to England and to Blackpool, where he basically sets her up to lie and pretend to be a Russian ballerina, because Russian ballerinas are the best. Russian ballerinas have had a reputation for 200 years of being fantastic. They still do. And the thing about a Russian ballerina at the turn of the last century is nobody in England is going to have actually go to Russia. They're not going to have seen the original. They're not going to have any idea who Nina Cheryslavsky is. And so when Ninette claims to be Nina Cheryslavsky, nobody cares but for the fact that she's a fantastic ballet dancer. She's a great ballet dancer. She's well trained and very, very good. And basically she winds up being turned into a star turn for a variety show that the local theater impresario has decided to put together. He has decided to move away from the music hall, from what used to be the standard way that they did things, which I'm not remembering the word off the top of my head, the thing that existed before Broadway. The point is that what you used to have is just these variety shows that would come in and out of theaters, and they were constantly on the move, and this impresario has said, let's create a stable show, a single show, and then we just play it, and, people won't get tired if we make a really, really good show. So basically he sets up a permanent theater troupe, whatever, in Blackpool, with Nina as sort of his big central star, and it's sort of a semi-variety show, but it's also a stable thing. And Nina gets this by virtue of a combination of her lie and her tremendous amount of skill and talent. And there's an evil elemental that, impersonates the original Nina Cheryslavsky and a whole bunch of other stuff, but that's like a whole bunch of adventure things that, frankly, it's real interesting and exciting, but I'm running out of time, so you're not going to hear about that. You'd have to read the book for it. The big thing is, it's a good time, and interestingly, reserved for the cat comes up at the very end of the book, because the cat gets his own thing. It gets a thing at the end. I'm really running out of time, so you're gonna have to read the book. Which I do recommend if you like fantasy novels set in relatively, century-old historical fantasy period. So, yeah, that's everything that I'm going to say, and I will see you all next week.